Hey guys, it's Miss Sinclair for AP World History. Today we are continuing to learn about Unit 1 and we are continuing to learn about South Asia. So last lecture you learned a lot about Hinduism and Buddhism and Jainism. Today we are going to talk about sort of the imperial expansion and collapse. So the way that we see governments forming and collapsing in this region. So for your bell work, a little bit of review. What are the belief systems of classical India and how did they influence society? The name of today's notes are Imperial Expansion and Collapse. So this is continued to be part of topic 1.3. So we're following along with our AP topics. Last time we looked at that second objective. Today we are looking at the first one. Explain how and why various states of South and Southeast Asia developed and maintained power over time. So, are you ready? We are starting with the Mauryan Empire. So the Mauryan Empire is still, before the year 1. The Mauryan Empire is going to be our first state to unify the Indian subcontinent, and it's going to be incredibly dominant. No one's really going to come close to this until we get to the British practically. It was going to be founded by Gupta Maurya in 324 BCE, and he was greatly influenced and inspired by Alexander the Great. So the capital is going to be here, Pataliputra in the Ganges River Valley. So here's the Ganges River. So we're still seeing that these rivers are acting as geographic markers of land that's fertile, places that can support a large population. So we're going to see that there's going to be about 300,000 people living in this city. And in general, we are going to see that the empire is governed by committees, kind of like departments. Like we have the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Defense, same kind of idea, except the departments will be manufacturing, trade, sales, taxes, the welfare of foreigners, and then the registration of births and deaths. So the Mauryan Empire is going to get really wealthy from taxes on agriculture, iron mining, and control of trade routes in and out of the empire. The government will really have monopolies on certain industries to really dominate the prices on them. Things like mining, liquor sales, the manufacturing of weapons, and they will even charge people to use the irrigation networks. They did establish a common coinage, though. So, they have this huge imperial army, infantry, cavalry, chariot division, war elephants. The idea of war elephants just always seems so, exciting to me. I picture the elephant creatures at the end of Lord of the Rings. So, they have sort of the mandala theory of foreign policy, the my enemy's enemy is my friend kind of mentality. So they're going to really aggressively expand under Ashoka. So Ashoka is going to be the third ruler of the Mauryan Empire, and he is going to be an extremely gifted warrior. So it is under his rule that the Mauryan Empire will expand the most. He's going to convert to Buddhism, and if you're thinking, expand the most, isn't that violence? Yeah, it is. Basically, once he gets finished expanding everywhere, supposedly at the Battle of Kalinga, he's going to look around and see bodies, dead bodies, people screaming in agony, women and children being led away as slaves, people being assaulted, just the utter violence of, war. And he's going to look around and be like, this doesn't seem right. Maybe war is bad. Pretty convenient to declare that war is bad after you've finished conquering everyone. And so if anyone's left to rebel, you can be like, no, I'm a pacifist now. You can't fight me. You gotta just be ruled by me. I don't do that fighting thing anymore. He is going to convert to Buddhism and begin preaching nonviolence, moderation, and morality. So with that, his government will really practice religious toleration, and he will really publicize these new ideals on these huge rock pillars that he will scatter across the empire. So really, it's because of Ashoka that Buddhism will diffuse so widely throughout India. This is the first example of Indian writing that we can actually translate. So remember, last time I asked you to watch this video up to Ashoka. Now I would like you to watch it from Ashoka to the end of the video. So let's think back to our last lecture. What are the origins of Buddhism, and how did it spread throughout India? Take a moment to reflect, maybe look back in your notes, hopefully discuss with a study buddy. Okay, I'm going to change slides now. So, commerce and culture. Well, we see that after Ashoka, the Mauryan Empire is not really going to retain its power and influence. It will decline, and after it falls, we don't really see any one power dominating India for like 500 years. So the infrastructure established by the Mauryan Empire will continue to allow commerce to flourish within the subcontinent. India will do trade with China, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, East Africa, and the Mediterranean through land and sea routes. So during this time period, we see a lot of growth of crafts like metalwork, cloth making and dyeing, jewelry, perfume, glass, and we see the expanded use of coins, gold coins. So the development of both local and long-distance commerce will allow for cities in the Indian subcontinent to really grow and prosper. But without a dominant political authority, we're going to see that merchants, these guilds, these sort of groups of merchants and artisans will become very powerful. And one of the ways that these groups really show off their power and their wealth, why, like, you need to see that we are really the best merchants in town. How can you tell? Well, we're the richest. Well, how can you, where's your money? Here. So they're going to really invest in building up all of these temples and monuments throughout India during this time as a way to really depict their power and wealth. We see during this time two epic stories out of sort of the Vedic culture is going to really be finalized and written down. So the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata will be reach their final form and be recorded. These tell stories of gods and heroes. They were originally part of an oral tradition that oral tradition will continue on, but you sort of have a finalized version of the story once you write it down. In South Asia, we see these Tamil kingdoms. So like the southern tip of the Indian subcontinent, we have these sort of three dominant Tamil kingdoms, which will be controlling. So if you're thinking about like India, the southern tip is going to be governed by actual political authorities, and the rest of India is really going to be sort of politically fragmented. All these cities, they're kind of doing their own thing, but doing trade with each other. Okay, our next dominant empire is going to be the Guptas. So the Gupta Empire is powerful, similar to the Mauryan, but they are going to be smaller. All right, they don't govern nearly as much territory. So, the Guptas are going to be much more focused on Hinduism, as opposed to the Mauryans, who were much more about Buddhism after Ashoka. They are going to control much of the subcontinent from the Ganges plain here, which is similar to the Mauryan Empire. They are never going to be as large or as organized as the Mauryans, right? So if we're thinking interactions with the environment, you still have irrigation systems, you're still building up roads and infrastructure. Agriculture is a huge part of your economy still. So it's going to be founded by Gupta. And the question for any empire is, how do you get people to obey you? How do you get people to listen to you? Well, the Gupta Empire is going to use something, what we refer to as a theater state. So, a theater state, and this is a term you should know. So, this is one that I don't have printed on the screen here, but I want you to write it down. So, a theater state is a historian's term for a state that acquires prestige and power by developing attractive cultural forms and staging elaborate public ceremonies. Let me say that more simply for you. A theater state is a term that historians use to refer to political states that are more show than substance. They have fabulous clothes and fabulous festivals and parades and beautiful temples and palaces, and everyone's like, wow, like, you look so fantastic. You must be really powerful and strong. When really they're really hollow. They are not that strong. It's all flash and no substance. So the Gupta Empire is an example of a theater state. The Srivijaya Empire in Indonesia will be a theater state as well. Don't ask how to spell it. It'll show up in a few slides. So you see constant solemn rituals and dramatic ceremonies and exciting cultural events and big parades. And so everyone's so impressed by kind of like the smoke and mirrors that they don't realize that, like, there's no one really controlling the government. We do see, however, that the Gupta Empire supports science and math to a greater extent than the Mauryans. So astronomers, mathematicians, and scientists all get royal support. So during this time, they are going to invent the concept of zero and the numbering system that we use today. Let me see. Okay. We are also going to see that in terms of society, a loss of women's rights and an increase in control over women's behavior. So just like in Mesopotamia and in Greece and in China, urbanization, complex political and social structures, and the emergence of a non-agricultural middle class leads to the loss of women's rights. So all these things contribute to each other, right? People are starting to live in cities. When you're living in a city, you're not working on a farm because you're getting more complex political and social structures. You're having a social class that's not just like peasant farmer and king, right? You have this middle sort of class. Okay, so what do you do with your money when you die, right? It's not so simple as like, oh, I need to have my son will be king after me. Or as simple as, just the family will continue farming this land, whoever's left over. Like you have some wealth to inherit to do something with. So it becomes more and more important who inherits your wealth after you die for this sort of middle class. So it's more and more important that you have sons. Sons can own and inherit property. Sons can study sacred texts, so women will lose the right to study sacred texts. They will lose the right to participate in certain rituals. In many ways, women, regardless of your caste, will be treated like a Shudra. Women will be expected to obey their father first, then husbands, then sons. Right? So this is very similar to the patriarchal system that we see in China. With Confucianism, and in the Mediterranean with Rome and Greece, right? Women have very little autonomy. We see that girls would be married very young. This includes child marriage. So if you're like, oh, yeah, I am too. Basically, why would a grown man marry a 6-year-old? Well, oftentimes it wasn't like necessarily pedophilia. I mean, yes, that was definitely part of it. But part of the idea was if a grown man marries a 6-year-old, he can raise her up to be his perfect wife. Essentially, he can groom her to be exactly the kind of wife he wants from her. and control her virginity to make sure she's not going to, explore her sexuality and sleep with like one of the neighborhood boys. No. Like he has control of her because they married young. Because she was like a literal child. So one of the other things we see being practiced during this time is sati, S-A-T-I. This is going to continue on throughout India in different parts. It comes back stronger and disappears. The practice of sati is one where a widow would self-immolate. So in Hindu culture, you practice cremation when someone dies. You don't bury their body, you burn it, and you put the ashes in the Ganges River. So in the process of sati, your husband dies, your job is to throw yourself on the funeral pyre and burn to death. Even if like you're 12 years old and he's 85 and you just like got married to him, you're still expected at 12 to commit suicide by burning to show your devotion to your husband. Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's really bad. Things are not good for women in India at this time. Specifically Hindu women, though. Many women would escape this fate by becoming a Jain or a Buddhist. Or if you were part of a powerful enough family, you wouldn't have to do this, right? So the Guptas were primarily Hindu. So you see sort of this emphasis on caste, this emphasis on role and fulfilling your karma, fulfilling your dharma. They will give the Brahmins, right, the priests, tons of money, make them very wealthy. They will continue to practice religious tolerance like the Mauryans, though. And so Buddhist monasteries will expand as well. Eventually, the Guptas will collapse from outside pressure. So take a moment to discuss how did the Mauryan and Gupta empires succeed in unifying India, and how were they similar and different? Okay, let's spend a little bit of time talking about Southeast Asia. So you have the Funan kingdom, which is going to be located at the bottom of sort of this large peninsula, like not quite all of the Malay Peninsula, but sort of like southern like Cambodia and like part of Thailand, I think. They are sort of our earliest civilization, and one of the key things we're going to see about Southeast Asian kingdoms is going to be the control of trade through the Strait of Malacca. So see this little bit of land or of water here going between the Malay Peninsula and the island of Sumatra. This is going to be known as the Strait of Malacca. And if you can control who comes in and out, you can control India's access to China, basically. So, the Srivijaya kingdom. I told you not to bother trying to spell it earlier. How would you sound that out? This is going to be a state based on the Indonesian island of Sumatra, right? Sumatra, between the 7th and 11th centuries. So, they will be really dominant in terms of trade. They're going to use technology they get from India, but they see a lot of diffusion of cultures and technology and spices, like everything, right? They're in this point, kind of like how Israel was, right? This cross point between China and the entire Indian Ocean maritime system. So that includes India, that includes the Middle East, that includes Africa. So you're going to see multiple languages being spoken in this land mass, multiple religions being practiced. So you'll see the influence of Hinduism and Buddhism. But we will see that the Srivijayan kingdom will be more greatly influenced by India than China. Although culturally they'll be more influenced by India, religiously, they're going to be Buddhist. They're our first really major Buddhist state. So you do still see the influence of Hinduism in bits and pieces, but not as much as Buddhism, which is one of the reasons why we still see in Southeast Asia Buddhism to be more dominant than Hinduism. So you have this massive temple structure called Borobudur. It's gorgeous. It's ginormous. You can sort of see the scale of it. If you are taking AP art history, this is one of the architectural pieces that you will learn about. This is one of your snapshots. So it's a large Mahayana Buddhist temple. So remember, Mahayana Buddhism is that branch of Buddhism that incorporates gods more often. And it consists of 9 stacked platforms, sort of square and circular. You see the Buddha is present in many of these stupas. Sort of this shape is, perforated shape is a stupa, sort of a temple. And it's sort of this unique Southeast Asia, Javanese Buddhist architecture. It's located in the middle of the jungle. It's gorgeous. Okay. How would long-distance migration influence South and Southeast Asia? So the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. How would technology influence migration? Right, so a couple of closing thoughts about Southeast Asia. Southeast Asian kingdoms will incorporate a lot of the Indian bureaucracy and government forms, as well as some of the general cultural beliefs, even if religiously they're going to stick more to Buddhism. So whereas like East Asia, Korea, Japan will be more influenced by China, Southeast Asia will be more influenced by India, the exception of that, of course, being Vietnam. Okay, let's do just a few practice questions to finish up our day. Nowhere for my little face to go. So, the Mauryan leader Ashoka converted to Buddhism and was a unique leader because what made Ashoka a unique leader? Why is the Gupta Empire described as a theater state? The most important cultural influences on Southeast Asian kingdoms came from last one. The Srivijayan kingdom was renowned for allying with Buddhists to build one of the most famous temples in. So what's the temple? Okay, so for your summary, please explain how and why various states in South and Southeast Asia developed and maintained their power over time. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you for listening and have a great day.